We talk about kill count, right? Screen
Yeah.
kill count, everyone. The amount of people that have been left in the city of Paris, in New York, in Tokyo, there is not enough ambulances. There is not enough
There's enough
freaking
earth
the
to
morgues,
dig these people in.
the morgues.
No.
There's
The morgues are overrun. The graveyards are just like
They gotta cremate
they're
these
just
dudes.
overrun.
They gotta cremate them.
Hello and welcome to the movie podcast review of John Wick Chapter 4. My name is Daniel. I am one of your hosts today, and joining alongside me are my fellow members of the Continental. It's Shahbaz.
Hello, Mr. Wick.
And it's Anthony.
What's up, Mr. Wick?
I don't know.
I don't like any of these voices that are happening right now.
You don't
I was
like
trying to
mine?
go-
Mine
I was trying to
felt
go
like it was
deeper.
on point.
I was trying to
You're
go
sounding,
deeper.
yeah, you're trying to go deep. That was deeper. You sounded a lot higher, I'll be
You
honest
sound a
with
lot
you.
higher.
Yeah. Like Shay sounded like Lance Reddick. I don't know who you sounded like at all.
You sound like
it's wild.
my God, what's the really ugly character from the Goonies called again? Oh my God. it's slipping my
Oh
name right
my
now.
god, no.
That's who you were, man.
My god. I am taking away your memberships to the Continental.
You're
You guys
kicking
are
us out,
about
eh?
to be
We're out.
You're kicking
Sloth,
us out. Yeah,
that's it.
you're excommunicado. You're about to be excommunicado very, very soon. Of course, this is our review of John Wick Chapter 4. Shay, please.
No, I was just saying in our world, Sloth from the Goonies ends up becoming part of the Continental Club. He becomes a hitman in a ways.
Yeah, because he moves in with what's his name at the end, who does the truffle shuffle at the end.
Yeah,
He moves in with his family. Yeah, and it's just wild. What we're talking, we're gonna bring it all back. We're gonna bring them all
Goonies,
back. Of
John
course,
Wick, same thing.
Same universe confirmed. You heard it here
Kiwi.
first. It is all
Kiwi's
part of
back.
the same world.
He's
Kiwi.
Kiwi-Kwan, 100%.
I can see Kiwi Kwan in like in a John Wick film. I can totally see him.
Oh yes.
He would be fantastic in a John Wick
In
film.
the
He'd
world.
be so cool. Maybe in one of the spin-offs they're doing, or maybe in another film. We're going to talk all about it. But of course, this is the movie podcast. You could catch brand new episodes all throughout the week and all the latest movies and series. Of course, we have reviews and interviews out as well too. We have so many incredible episodes. You don't want to miss any of them. So please make sure you're following us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Letterboxd, because we have some incredible content going up there. Of course, at the Movie Podcast is where you could find us. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe and join our Discord. Our Discord, we're having some incredible conversations in there. So you don't want to miss it. We're going to have a channels open for all of the movies and shows that we're talking about. So we're having a lot of great conversations. Shay, anything you want to mention about the Discord? What's going on right now?
Well, Last of Us has finally come to a sad and bittersweet end. So we still have our spoiler channel kind of up for that right now. I'll probably keep it up for the next little bit. But we do have some other shows and movies coming out very soon. For example, Shazam! Fear of the Gods will be out very soon. We'll be opening up a spoiler chat for that, of course. And then the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which is a small indie film, I believe, that'll be coming out as well. And then, of course, we'll probably have a spoiler chat up for that. So get in your spoiler chats while they're hot. If you want to discuss The Last of Us, if you want to talk about the Oscars right now, whatever's kind of happening, go ahead, join our Discord, get in there, have those conversations, because let me tell you, they are a poppin'.
They are popping. Also, there's like what I mentioned, there's some great interviews that we've had over the last couple of weeks, over the last month of March and then February. We've been really lucky to talk some cool people like Guy Pearce, Devin Okoda, who's just in Scream, pretty much the entire cast of Shazam! Fury of the Gods. So there's lots to listen to, lots to look forward to, and an endless amount of episodes, interviews, and reviews for you to catch up on. Like Shay said, the Super Mario Brothers movie is coming very, very soon. It is the ultimate birthday present for me, for it to be releasing in April. Some say it was destined to happen. I am the people that say that it was destined to happen. But yeah, there's lots to look forward to. And of course, let's get right into it. John Wick Chapter 4 releases in theaters on March 24th from Lionsgate, and in Canada from Cineplex Pictures. It stars a massive cast, including some incredible names like Keanu Reeves, Bill Skarsgård, Clancy Brown, Ian McShane, and someone who's recently on the movie podcast, Shamier Anderson. I want to say thank you to our friends at Cineplex Pictures for inviting us to watch this film, and I'm going to kick it over to Anthony to give us the synopsis.
John Wick uncovers a path to defeating the High Table, but before he can earn his freedom, Wick must face off against a new enemy, with powerful alliances across the globe and forces that turn old friends into foes.
I love it. Now, this is the 4th chapter of the Wickverse, so let's see if it stays fresh. Shay, start us off with your first reactions.
John Wick 4 has some of my favorite action sequences in the entire franchise. The way that they were carefully able to blend a lot of what worked before in the franchise now into a more fresh and unique take, I thought was fantastic. I think Keanu is consistently just taking a beating to continue to elevate this role. But I do have a lot of issues with this film as well. And maybe some of them might not be that glaring or that big. But I think by the time you're in the 4th entry of this franchise, it's still good. And I still had a good time with the film. But the issues that kind of happened for me is that in this film, it's nearly 3 hours and it had no need to be that long. The world and lore that's kind of being created and given to us starts to get a bit convoluted and starts to kind of just blend into what we've seen before. I mean, 2, 3, and 4 really just kind of feel like the same film, albeit even better action sequences in this one. I wasn't a huge fan of how Keanu's lines were just kind of cut down in this film, but did I have a great time watching Shamier Anderson? Yes. Did I have a great time watching his dog companion that would go and kill anyone that they kind of saw? Yes. There are
Nuts!
Oh my god, it scared me. I thought he was gonna attack me in the room. I hope not.
Dino was coming for you. Dino, no!
Breaks open my door. But then you have a lot of different side characters in this film that I feel like are doing the exact same role twice, and they don't kind of go anywhere. For example, Shamier Anderson, and then you have Donnie Yen's character. They're both after Wick. We're both rooting for them, and they both, kind of have a very similar trajectory throughout the entire film. So you have a lot of repeat characters that are occurring. You have Laurence Fishburne and
Ian McShane.
Ian McShane, sorry, who are also both playing the same kind of character. And, you don't really have much conflicting with John. The film kind of starts and picks up at random points, and it just feels like it's going scene to scene without really pushing the actual story forward, even though I'm not quite sure what the story was.
That's fair. I think it's interesting you bring that up, because if you were to ask me right now, what is this movie about? Tell me about like the actual story of this film. It's a little hard to try and explain it because there's just a lot going on. What I will say though is that, overall baseline, what is this movie about? It's about John Wick, taking out a lot of people, trying to get to the high table, which I feel like is the same story as you mentioned, Shay, for every single John Wick film, other than the first one, which really was lightning in a bottle, where it was that vengeance tale. It was that revenge tale of, this is what the world has done wrong to me, and I'm going to come back and get every single one of these people who did me wrong in this movie. Where fast forward 3 movies later, now in chapter 4, the story feels like we're kind of in a very similar place. But we will talk more about it because there's a lot that I really loved in this movie that I want to talk to. But I want to give Anthony some time right now. Anthony, take it away with your first reactions.
Look, can I sit here and say John Wick 4 is the greatest action movie of all time? No, but it does come very close. And the reason why it's not the greatest action movie of all time is because the story is very dry and it's very thick, and it doesn't reflect the excitement that you get out of the fight sequences into the actual story itself. So those highs that you get when you're watching Keanu perform these awesome and very relenting action sequences, they're very good. But once that high goes into the story, it's so dull. It's like, and it's surprising because at times I find myself, these are interesting characters. Why do I not want to know more about them? Why am I bored with what they're saying? Why am I falling asleep? Like at times I found myself nodding off because there was nothing happening on screen for me to be like, well, I'm captivated by the story of his revenge for the high table. Like for someone who wants so much revenge, there's the least amount of excitement that goes into it. Like I can't believe it. It's just, there are interesting characters. Like I would say Scott Adkins's Killa, who's a German thug, and you might not even notice him. He plays like he's in an overweight fat man suit, and you don't even know it's Scott. But like once you see him perform his actions, fantastic, but his character is so like blah. Like the lines that are given to him is just boring.
It feels unnecessary to the story, right? Like
Yeah,
it doesn't feel like it's anything other than a setup to get to an action scene.
right.
It's very much like a fetch quest.
And
Yeah.
I can say we can all say that the action sequences in this film are top notch. You know, Chad does a fantastic job of directing these close quarter combat sequences, and Keanu Reeves showcases that he is John Wick and he embodies that character. But you're right, Daniel. You said that was it. I'm not sure if it was Daniel or Shade. Like his lines are cut. Like this is someone who actually has something to say after 4 films, and he probably has maybe 2 pages of lines in this 3-hour film. Why?
Yeah.
Why are we not hearing John Wick talk?
Yeah. We get a lot of that. A lot of that.
A lot of that, Anthony, because I was the one that mentioned the line thing. A lot of that reminded me of if you look at the Bourne franchise and you have Jason Bourne in part 1, 2, 3, he's ass kicking, he's got great lines. And then you get into Jason Bourne, which is the 4th entry. And I think he had a total of like 70 words maybe in the entire film. It felt like that to me. It felt like, why did you like? Yes, Keanu's delivery of John Wick's lines were always entertaining. I think about part 1 where he's like, "Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back," and it's just so cool, sense shivers. And even in 2, 3, 4, I say 2 and 3, he has these really fun moments. But in this one, it's kind of just like you can tell he either his character is tired or he's tired or someone's bored. He loses interest, which means that I'm not interested.
Really quickly, Shay, just to talk to what you said about Jason Bourne. So he has 288 words, which sounds like it's a lot of words, but when you think about it, it only equates to about 25 actual lines of dialogue.
That's it.
In a 2-hour something movie, which is very, very interesting.
And you're the main character.
And you're the main character. The movie literally has both of your. The movie now has both your names.
First
Jason
and last
Bourne.
name. Yeah.
Yeah. But let's talk about the action in this movie, because there is no doubts that John Wick 4 has some of the greatest action I've ever seen in a movie. There are so many sequences of action in this film that I was just like, this is incredible. It is ballet. It is poetry in motion. The action choreography in this film is second to none. It is frenetic. It's like I'm literally just jaw dropped while watching it, and that includes the cinematography. And it's like when this movie is firing on all cylinders, it has an artillery just going nuts at you. Like I was blown away by that. There's some sequences that feels like it's straight out of like Hotline Miami, where we have like this camera like up above and it's following him room to room. It is like straight out of a video game. It is wonderful, and it literally is pedal to the metal. It is full speed, and then it just hits a brick wall when it's going to the actual story of this film, where it just feels like we are just slowing down. We are literally just putting the brakes. We're pulling the emergency brake and just halting everything. So just as you're starting to go, you're just like stop and go all the time. And then I would say the last hour is really where this movie found its footing. And I think it's really where we kind of get to like, okay, we're setting up this final battle. This is where this movie's taking off. And obviously it's absurd. It's over the top. There's a sequence in this film where they're just like they're in that, I forget what it's called in France, like that roundabout, that famous roundabout.
Arc de Triomphe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shahbaz. And it's like they have a fight going on there. And I'm like, these cars aren't stopping. There are people literally being shot and being run over by cars. And like, you know what? Maybe that's just the culture in France. They don't stop. They don't care. But it was just wild to see. I'm like, how is this still happening? And it's such a long sequence in what feels like should be like a quicker moment in the movie. And I think this movie, it really is just like, you know, Chad, the director, just being like, listen, I'm going to intentionally make these moments feel as drawn out as possible. There's literally sequences where it's just like a full character walking down a whole hallway, and it's like that is like a minute and a half of your time is just walking down a hallway. This movie could use a lot of trimming, but I mean, when you get to the action and a lot of editing, when you get to the action, you are just like glued in, you are zoned in. But because there is so much of it, you could also start to feel a little bit of that exhaustion by the end of the film, because you just watched 3 hours where like 70% of this movie is the craziest action you've ever seen. And the other bit of it is just the slowest story that feels non-consequential at all. Because when you look at the grand scheme of the John Wick films, it feels like every film since 2 has been the same story. Who else does he have to take down? Who are these other members of the high table? Who's above the table? Who's below the table? It just feels like we're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And there's not a lot to distinguish the characters or the motives from 2, 3, and 4 in this film.
The franchise constantly feels like it's talking to you in riddles. I mean, there's so many moments where it's just, new lore being introduced, new vernacular being used here. Then you have just characters that are like, yeah, well, you have to go do this, to go do that, to go do this. Like the opening sequence of this film is so interesting because it also feels inconsequential. It just starts off, with like a little bit of a training set scene. Just really quickly, he's just punching.
Yeah.
Cuts to
really
him
cool
in the
moment.
really cool moment.
Yeah, really
You felt
cool moment.
it.
Yeah.
It cuts to him in the desert on a horseback chasing, and then it kind of cuts back to, I guess, New York or wherever they were. It's just you're like, oh, okay. Well, what was
Did
that?
we need that?
Was that just an action sequences you wanted to throw in there? It just felt like they, again, with this franchise, they plot out the action sequences first, and then they're like, well, how can we connect a story to this? And they don't do a good job of connecting the story because, again, the story just is so, like, really, if you were to ask me to repeat it back to you, I don't know what I would say. I'm like, yeah, he's just killing, and it's great. But when you have 3 hours, I need more than action, because there are a lot of great action films out there, and they do a fantastic job of balancing both story and action.
And if you're going to do just action, then really do it. When you introduce a story that drags a lot and just feels just so at odds with the action it's introducing, I think that's where you're getting this weird clash of, okay, what are you trying to be? Are you trying to be an all-out action film like The Raid, or do you want to tell a more serious story like The Raid 2? And I think The Raid 2 is a film that balances both those worlds really well, where this one, action, anytime there's action on screen, it's like 10 out of 10. It is amazing. But when we get to the story, it really is throwing on all of the brakes. Anthony.
I think it's because they're writing the story as they go. Like, really, there's a lot of just thrown in there, and they're trying to duplicate exactly what they did in the second and third film. They're not really focusing on the first film, which had the best story, which was so small, and here's a guy who had to take revenge on the people who shot his dog because it was connected to his wife. But now it's like, even in the story, they're saying they're conflicting with themselves, saying, you, every time you try to kill us, there's always going to be someone higher. So what's your end game? And it's almost like, are you self-aware in that sense, that you knew that even you as writers couldn't figure out where the story goes? I felt fatigued, and there was a good fatigue because the fight sequences and the action sequences are they're very long, and they really at times one cut sequences. You do feel like you experience 3 nights with John Wick. It's very hard, like the fights, and you'll see it in the trailer. You see it in the trailer, the fights, the nunchucks, the battles here and there and everywhere, and you're traveling from Tokyo to Paris to the desert and back to New York, and there's a whole bunch of action sequences within that, and they're very long, and they take up time. But you do feel fatigued.
With not a lot of cuts, like you said, Anthony.
Not a lot of cuts.
You're it's not like quick cuts. Like, you are in these long takes of action, which are amazing to see. The work that went into this from the stunt team and Keanu and Shamier and everyone involved, it's incredible. But it definitely is tiring when you get 3 hours of that, right?
Right. And I'm not saying it's too much action, but I'm saying the electricity that you get from those action sequences are not met with the story. So when you do get to the point of that story, it's like your blood, your heart rate just drops to zero, and you're just like, I just watched Keanu Reeves fight at least 1,000 people. We talk about kill count, right? Screen kill count, everyone. The amount of people that have been left in the city of Paris, in New York, in Tokyo, there is not enough ambulances. There is not enough.
There's enough earth
to
dig these people in.
The morgues.
No.
The
morgues are overrun. The graveyards are just
they gotta cremate these dudes. Overrun. They gotta cremate them.
But also and this is what I also love about this how silly these movies are too at some points, because there's some aspects of John Wick, because they are recruiting such legends like Donnie Yen and Laurence Fishburne, and in the last film Halle Berry, and these big names. It kind of has an Expendables feel to it, We're just like, let's have like these big names show up. They're a lot a lot more well-made films than I would say the Expendables films are, because like all the John Wick films are very well-made movies. But like everyone in these worlds are also assassins, by the way. Like when the call comes in and it's like, yeah, there's a hit on Wick, I feel like everyone gets activated. Like it's like a push notification that comes on everyone's phone. Like when there's
Everyone's a
an
sleeper
extreme,
agent. Everyone's a sleeper agent.
it's like an Amber Alert that goes off, and everyone's like, oh shoot, let's all go kill John Wick.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I love that.
Donnie Yen is absolutely fantastic. I fucking love that guy. Like I didn't know I didn't know his character was blind. So when I learned about it, and I think that is given in the synopsis. I just didn't know. So when you learn about, holy shit, he's a blind assassin and he uses all these things to kind of like his martial arts is so quick and so fast. And he uses a gun and he uses a blade and he's also blind. It's like, holy shit, it's like Daredevil, but like the opposite of Daredevil. He's not doing good, but it's
and the doorbells
scary.
and everything too. There's some really cool moments.
There are parts where you're like, man, I don't ever want to mess with like a blind person, because this guy is literally killing instant kills. Very, very good. And his backstory is like there's a lot of empathy to his character. So there's a situation where like, what would I do and how would I do it? And
right,
it always involves family. And that's even John in his, when he talks to him, he's like, family. He's like, family, John. He's like, well, it is what it is. Like that's what you have to do. But like, Donnie Yen, he's like 60 and he is so fast. My gosh, perfect casting.
It's interesting though that he's phenomenal, but it's interesting that they also were like, hey, like we saw Rogue One, we know how great he could be in that also as someone who is blind, and we're also going to do that in this film as well too. I wonder if that was like a choice that like Donnie wanted to make, or is that something that was written to the script? I'm really curious to know if that's where that kind of idea was introduced, and obviously he was on board to do it. Let's get right into it then. Let's start with our final recommendations for John Wick Chapter 4. Anthony, I'm going to get you to start us off.
This is a watch it. Even though the story is, like I said, it's dull. It's not very energetic. It doesn't match the craziness of the action sequences. I think it's enough of a sacrifice to actually experience these action sequences, because they're absolutely beautiful. And I'm a huge Keanu Reeves fan, so nothing he does is really bad. And I think the characters that we get and how Chad directed this film and the places that we travel to is just remarkable. And I think, everything that we got in this movie, even though it's like 3 hours long, it's worth the watch.
I'm right there with you. I think, this is a watch it for me too. It is also like a little bit of an asterisk on that, because like if you are going into this series, this is Chapter 4, exactly what you're getting up to this point. So if you weren't on board with the first John Wick, or especially 2 and 3, number 4 isn't going to do anything to win you over. But what I will say is that Chapter 4 has some of the greatest action scenes I've ever seen on screen, some of the most intense fights I've ever seen on screen, and some of the best visuals in those fights. So that for me is worth admission alone. I think that's what makes this movie incredible. It's just a shame that outside of that, the story doesn't do enough to really keep you invested. It really is something that you just kind of have to, wade through to get to some of the greatest action. So you'll have to, suffer the story to get some of the action. But it's a watch for me. Shahbaz, take us home.
For me, this is an added to the queue. I think there's some, again, great moments. There's some great action, but a lot of it does become forgettable. And I think that when you have a franchise that's 4 movies in, I'm glad that there's still some gas in the tank. But this one, it really started to show that the gas was starting to run out. I love Keanu, and I hope that he does more action films like this. But I won't be remembering this movie, I think, much after a few weeks. But part 1, I will remember until I die.
I think that's completely fair to say. And it's really curious to know, like, or to think, where is this series going to go? Chapter 4, we have 4 movies deep. We're going to have a spin-off series. Is there going to be a Chapter 5? We'll have to wait and see how this one performs. But thank you so much for listening to the Movie Podcast spoiler-free review of John Wick 4. If you want to find more reviews of the Movie Podcast, if you want to hear more interviews and more of our thoughts on films and TV series, make sure you're following the show in all podcast feeds and on YouTube. Make sure you check out all of the other incredible reviews and interviews that we've been doing over the last couple weeks and months and years, pretty much at this point. And follow us on YouTube. Drop a like, leave a comment below. Let us know if you're excited for John Wick Chapter 4. There's so much to look forward to this year. And this month, there's so much coming. So we're just really happy that you're here with us. And of course, that was this time with the Movie Podcast. And we'll see you next.